This is a very special episode of Fangirl Chat, and Trisha's with me, but we've got some very special people. They come from the Star Wars Report, but it's Riley and Bethany Blanton.
Hello.
Hey, thanks for having us.
I'm just enjoying
no problem.
I'm just enjoying the music. Nothing like a little bit of patriotic music to get us feeling great here.
If you can't tell, we are going to talk Hunger Games on this particular episode, and specifically Catching Fire. But I'm assuming everyone saw it since you're all here.
Oh, wait, we had to watch it? Yes, we have seen it.
So, initial impressions. Riley?
You're going to hate me. You know what? There was something about Catching Fire that really caught the fire of my heart.
Aww.
No, I couldn't resist. It was teed up and I took a swing. Couldn't resist. No, Hunger Games. There's something about Catching Fire, this film, that really established a world in conflict where you got hints of the rebellion brewing, and you have characters that you've just been introduced to, that you really get a feel for their emotional qualities and the conflicts within, like Katniss and Peeta and all the different characters throughout the film, and they're very diverse. I love that aspect. I love how the film really builds the tension up to the final battle in the arena, and I loved how there was a cliffhanger ending, leaving you craving, the war that is inevitable, just like the first movie. I absolutely loved Hunger Games Catching Fires in all the exact same ways that I absolutely loved the Hunger Games, which is not necessarily a criticism, but I tell you what, I did really actually, in all seriousness, love the film. It was just also a lot of the similar themes, I guess, from the first film.
Bethany?
I really enjoyed Catching Fire, and I didn't really have Riley's dilemma with it because I have read all of the books.
I have not,
unlike him.
So, that explains a lot.
Yes. So I thoroughly enjoyed the film and felt that it definitely stayed true to the spirit of the books. And I felt like it explored particularly Katniss and Peeta's characters more in depth. It wasn't just a complete how they act when they're in survival mode, but what happens to the survivors afterwards. With her nightmares and whatnot.
Well, the most important thing in this movie was that they put the correct buttercup in. So we have to start there, which is one way it is different from the first movie, in that we have the correct buttercup, and he made 3 appearances, not just one skimpy showing, what I liked. And I thought they did this script was originally started by Gary Ross and Simon Boyfoy, and then taken over by Michael Arndt, who was the
that sounds vaguely familiar
on episode 7. But he talked he's taught classes about screenwriting. He talks about that how A New Hope was like the perfect script, and that it just drives relentlessly towards the ending. And I felt like this movie had that sort of, it was unrelenting in how it just kept pushing you through characters, and, it didn't waste any space. And the characters that that you see, the granddaughter of Snow, who I thought they just used her so brilliantly just to sort of say, hey, there wasn't just tension for the victors, there was tension for Snow too. You were like, oh wow, his world's maybe crumbling a little bit. So anyway, and Teresa?
I loved it, and I think I loved it more than I loved the original Hunger Games movie, which is hard to beat for me because I really liked it. But I loved the depth that Jennifer Lawrence played Katniss with. I just thought it was brilliant. Gale did a fantastic job. Gale, his real name is Liam. He did a fantastic job, and then Josh as Peeta did great. But
I think his full name is Liam Be Still My Heart Hemsworth.
I really loved Joanna as a character. Like, how she was in my head is exactly how she came out in the film, and the whole time I just wanted to be like, yes!
I know she's
awesome!
She's so full of life and so very much herself. She's very distinctly a character role own making.
And I'll tell you what amazes me is just how they've captured the regardless of it's very similar in many themes, but I shouldn't I think may have come across negating some of the brilliant aspects to it, which are present in the. I will say this: a lot of the themes that were present in the first film, this film does progress further. And it might just be, and I think you may have, hit the nail on the head, Teresa, when you said it explains it that I haven't read the books, because I'm like, war, let there be war. Oh. But I'll tell you what, we saw it in a jam-packed. We saw it Saturday evening, the weekend it came out, and Bethany and I could not sit together. We both went, and we had to choose two different rows because we were there a few minutes early, and there were no seats. And,
oh my gosh!
It was great.
I went to a 9 p.m. showing on Thursday night. So they had it at like 8, 8:30, 9, 9:30, 10, 10:30, and like 11. So it was pretty cool because I didn't have to wait for a midnight show. And so there was like nobody there because everyone thought it started at midnight because they did have midnight showings. So my 9 o'clock show was like half full.
Oh, wow.
And, but it was still really cool, and the crowd was very lively, and I really enjoyed it. But I do have some scenes I wanted to ask you guys about. The first one is the scene in District 11. And how did that emotionally make you feel?
I'm trying to remember. So this was the district where Peeta announces that he's giving part of the winner's earnings.
Right.
Yes.
This is a scene where, oh, by the way, anybody who hasn't seen the movie, spoiler alert, all over the place. And if you haven't read the book, even bigger spoiler alert.
Yep, you should just not be listening.
Just don't even listen to this. Yes, District 11 is the district that Rue is from the first movie, Rue and Thresh. Mm-hmm. And it's the one where the first place they stop on the tour, and they announce they're going to give away some of their earnings.
I think it's interesting how, as much as Katniss and Peeta feel the need to put on the show, they just can't. As hard as they try, they can't. And I thought that's really well portrayed because these are characters where I think in some ways I like the idea of a hero who, when faced with the dire consequence of having to protect their own family, and in so doing kind of betray the very people that they've inspired, they even though they're trying to, they ultimately just fail miserably at betray. It's like they're trying to betray based on pressure from the president, and they can't. And I love that aspect to it.
Anyone else have any thoughts on that scene?
Well, the whole scene is heartbreaking, especially if you're, just what Rue meant to Katniss. And so, she's sort of being torn in two. And at that point, Haymitch and Peeta aren't in on the, hey, Katniss got busted kissing Gale by the president, and now he's holding over everything over her head. So, she's, in that moment turns to Haymitch, and she's like, help me, help me, help me. And he's like, this is just what it is. That you think you won the games and it's over, but it's not. It's never over. But the reality is it was never over even before she went into the games in the first movie. It was always going to be that way. So I think that's kind of the moment where, you realize, whoa, okay, they're literally on the train of inevitability towards what's going to happen. So I was bawling during the scene. I admit it. That was one of my first tear jerkers.
It's the first scene that I started crying into, and mostly, I mean, with everything you guys are saying makes complete sense, but for me, it was, the crowd just putting up the three fingers and then having the peacemakers grab this guy and then kill him. And I knew it happened, but it doesn't make it any less heart-wrenching and making me want to reach through the screen and start punching people.
Yes, that is how I felt, and the emotion in that scene, especially as Katniss expresses it, you can feel it in the crowd, but you can see it on the face of a character that you know quite well, and she carries that emotion with her throughout the film. You can see it in a number of ways, but for instance, when she sees the picture that Peeta drew, and you can see her just start shaking, and you know that she's a combination of enraged and also incredibly sad. And that type of emotion, again, that what happens to survivors of situations like that, whether it be in our own history, like the Holocaust, or whether it's portrayed in a novel like that, is something that not many people, thankfully, have a first-hand understanding of it. But we do need to understand that people who go through really rough situations do wind up feeling that way about things.
Definitely.
I think what Bethany's saying too is that this movie gives you, there's empathy in the characters. She wants you to feel for her, whereas we're supposed to go through this emotional journey with Clark Kent in Man of Steel, and I didn't feel like I went anywhere with the character. Whereas, I felt like Jennifer Lawrence was sucking you in and saying, feel everything that Katniss feels in this moment. In many of the moments in the scene where you're just right up to the last moment where you just want to be as mad as she looks, and all you see is her face, and you just know that there's something changed inside her. And so I just thought this movie did a good job of making you feel things for characters, and not just her, but everybody.
Yeah. Did you guys have a favorite scene?
I'm glad you asked. My favorite scene was the wedding dress scene at the end. Specifically the moment where he says, "Oh, it's some sort of bird." And she says, "No, it's a mockingjay." And that was really a true moment of defiance. And I think it's a hopeless one, and that's the difference between that very last moment that you guys just mentioned at the end of the film where you see that anger. That's an anger, but it's no longer hopeless. Whereas at this point, that was kind of a hopeless anger in that moment. But man, I love the symbolism there.
Did you think, Riley, since you haven't read the books, when you saw that happen, did you in your head go, something's going to happen to Cinna? Or did you even see that coming?
No, didn't see that coming at all. No, and it's one of those things where I saw that moment in the trailer, and its significance was totally lost on me to the point where I hadn't thought about it. I am you guys, feel free to experiment on me. I'm the one who I saw maybe one or two trailers, knew everyone was going to see this movie, and thought, you know what, I want to try it out. But I'll tell you what, I'm looking at it right now, Rotten Tomatoes, 89% for the critics' ratings.
Pretty good.
I mean, and the audience ratings are even higher, 94. I mean, it's smashing the box office, smashing critics. It's really connected in a way that even confounds me as much as I love the movie.
Well, and my favorite moment was right the second after she lifted up, when the victors all joined hands and lifted them up on stage, and then they were like, cut the broadcast. No, we're not going to show the victors standing up against the system or the Capitol. So that was definitely the whole kind of scene was profound and what it established. Yeah. And they're just interesting that the male-female ratio on the audience for opening weekend has gone up to, it's pretty much 50-50, where it was the first movie was, the opening weekend was heavily skewed towards the female demographic. Really? So I think it's really interesting that they're coming out with the numbers, and this movie is drawing in the numbers and also showing that it can bring both men and women into the theater equally.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Bethany, did you have a favorite scene?
I would have to say that that was my favorite scene as well, the one with the wedding dress, and also seeing the former victors all hold hands. It's a gesture of solidarity, and as Riley mentioned, of hope.
Well, and that kind of previews in many ways the reveal, which again totally blew me out of the water that I didn't see coming at all. Even, okay, this is where I'm going to just show how oblivious I am. Even in the moment when the name's escaping me of the competitor who was the expert at disguise.
Oh, the
former
Morphlings?
victor.
Morphlings.
Yeah.
Yes, the Morphlings. Now, even when they stepped in and saved them, and Katniss and Peeta make a comment, it's like you saved it. I don't know why. And then they just kind of went on. I just totally, it did not, nothing clicked. I'm that slow, I guess. But when I realized it towards the end, it really struck me. They could have even gone further, I think, to where that could have been the crux of the film, which I guess in kind of ways it was. It was that big reveal of it was them. It's kind of an almost Hitchcockian moment.
Well, and it's in the book you sort of don't get it until the end either, when they start, Katniss starting to put together the pieces of what everybody was doing. And it's interesting too, because that moment of hope for the victors isn't necessarily that that they have to fight in the arena. They're still hoping the Capitol will revolt and stop the Hunger Games.
Yeah.
That's their hope in that moment. And, they come down and, Effie and Haymitch say, well, we're still, they haven't changed their mind. But it's, it's interesting that they're kind of hoping, we're not going to have to go to the arena. The Capitol will say, wow, this is really bad. And it's kind of cool too. I don't know what you guys think of how they're turning around the idea of the happily ever after. I mean, they put the wedding dress on, which is supposed to be, you see princess movies and everything, and it's your happily ever after. And then, oh, she's pregnant, and they're taking that away from her too, which is, all, they're starting to, play the game back, right, to the Capitol. But how that plays out as far as what it turns around our expectations as viewers. So
I'll tell you what, that moment where Peeta made that comment got out loud laughs. And the moment, also just another brief, it wasn't necessarily a personal favorite moment, but I love, there's part of me that really hates it, but most of me really loves being in a crowded movie theater, especially on an opening weekend of a genre film like this. And the moment where Katniss fires the arrow with the wire attached, and the dome begins to break, both symbolically and physically, the audience erupted into cheers. And this isn't like the Hunger Games fan convention. This is just your Podunk Theater here in Fayetteville, Georgia, and that's what I loved it.
Yeah. My favorite scene was actually one that was a little bit more lighthearted, when Peeta was saying, we could actually become friends when they're on the train, and we should know something about each other and stuff like that. And he asks her what her favorite color is, and she kind of jokes back with him, but then she actually answers the question. I think that was a really good scene because it added some humor. It was an interesting dialogue that you would probably have with somebody right next door to you, and then also it sort of softened Katniss up a little bit.
It was a very good character moment too. Definitely. And what I liked about that scene as well, though, is it shows that, Peeta and Katniss do care about each other. I mean, there might be a good bit of tension there because she doesn't really like him, though he does like her, in a more special way, that is. But they are.
He
still
loves her.
I know. But they still do care about each other as humans and as friends, regardless of the tension and the circumstances, and the difference in their level of feeling towards each other.
So I have to ask this question, and we're going to completely ignore the fact that three of us know what happens in Mockingjay. But do you think that where we are, how it was portrayed, that Katniss is in love with Peeta or Gale or both?
Lando. Actually, Bethany, that was one of the questions that Bethany asked me out of walking out of the theater. So who do you think she ends up with? And I'll quote my initial. I might have changed my opinion, but I think for the sake of experiment, I'll quote what I initially said to Bethany walking out of the theater. And I said, "Oh, Peeta, of course." And she remained stone faced, so I couldn't tell one way or the other. And I was like, "Well, I don't." And then I said, "I don't know. That might be just what I hope happens. I don't know, but."
So what you're saying, Riley, is that you're Team Peeta.
He is totally Team Peeta.
I mean, I guess you could say that.
He has a Team Peeta t-shirt. Just don't tell anyone.
I'm wearing it right now.
Trisha?
Well, I have. Well, I'm always Team Katniss, but Gale is the guy, but there's different. Gale is sort of supposed to be the person she is supposed to be like her true love, the person she thinks, or maybe childhood sweetheart. So that type of dynamic is what they're playing with storytelling wise. Mm-hmm. And, just for reasons, whatever happens, you can see them starting to draw apart. And the great, moment when she, when Peeta's like, I can't live without you. And, I would be nothing. And, he's sort of saying he would lay down his life, and her whole thing is she wants to lay down her life. And then, you see that kind of vulnerability in her and in him, and you're like, okay, I get it. I like Peeta too.
Well, I mean, as a film viewer, I just know so little about Gale, and I feel like it may be the Hemsworth's portrayal, it might be the script, but I really don't feel. In fact, I think. As we've talked, I think I've come to realize a lot more of the strengths than the similarities that kind of stuck with me throughout the film. I was like, wow, this, because especially the relationship with Gale to me seemed like on some levels it was nearly an exact repeat of what happened in the first film. Where there's tension, they're in love at first, but they get separated, and then she's with Peeta and has to pretend to be in love with him, and Gale doesn't like that, and he's in the mines. I mean, and again, I think there might be more depth there either in the books or that we'll learn more in the future films. But just as a film viewer, that was a relationship that maybe because of its repetition didn't ring true with me as much.
We didn't get the full-on love triangle in the first movie, though. They were sort of soft selling it, and even Francis Lawrence said he was all in for this one. He wasn't gonna, this isn't like the sort of, Twilight where it's, sort of kind of weird. You're not even sure what she likes about
you. had to bring up Twilight, dude. Really?
Well, the reason is that you actually understand why she likes both guys. Like, yeah. I don't get. Well, I don't get what Bella likes about her.
And Tricia, if you could hand me that shovel, I'll dig a little deeper.
But you have a good point, Trisha. I mean, there's definitely something to like about Peeta, and there's definitely something to like about Gale, and more than just the way that he looks.
Yeah, and not in a creepy stalker kind of way either.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's face it.
Don't knock on how he looks either.
Well, and let's face it, Twilight redefined love triangles.
Oh my god.
I don't know. I mean, there were huge shipping debates back in the Luke Skywalker with Callista and Mara days, and Jaina Jag and Kip, and Zek wasn't even the third. He wasn't even the second guy in the shipper debate. He was the third, but somehow Star Wars dredged him up. So I think the love triangles have been part of storytelling forever. It's just that Twilight convinced Hollywood that you could put it in a movie and it wouldn't be like, oh God, that people would actually go crazy for it.
Mm-hmm. Anywho, I'm gonna leave that one alone. So was there any other moments from the movie before I get to my last question that you guys wanted to mention?
Just to mention in brief again, Katniss's expression at the very end of the film, like Tricia said, that was a definite standout moment in the film. There was so much emotion portrayed in that moment. Nothing was hidden in that moment. If you had been standing next to the actual character in some sort of actual plane of existence, you could have not known anything about the story or what happened to her, and you would still see a lot of it. And that was just incredible.
Absolutely. You know, and as I think more about the film and having had this conversation, I think I'm coming away enjoying it in my memory more. And I think part of it was, especially towards the beginning of the film, where I saw some similarities. It kind of traps you as a viewer, and that kind of thing can often happen. I think when you're viewing a film, and I think it's like a personal lesson on my end. It's like we learn something. We learn something. Traveling to theaters, and I just reached for my soundboard to click on the "More You Know" sound bite, but it's turned off. So I just wanted to point that out so everyone would know. Just simulate that in your mind. But and if I could just point out one specific moment that jumped out to me is the one thing that totally took me by surprise was the way the alliance system worked in the Hunger Games. And that was obviously polar opposite of how it went in the first film. And that might be why I like it so much. And that is just, I was waiting for buff dude, what's his face?
Finnick?
And by face, I mean name. Finnick, thank you. Finnick, I was waiting for him to betray them. He's supposed to. He's the other good-looking guy. He has to be evil. And, of course, they did not go with that trope, and in fact showed that he was quite a noble fellow. And I really liked that part. And the way he tries to take care of, and failing
Mags.
to take care of Nads, it was so sad. So sad. Feels.
Actually, that brings me to a question since you brought up Finnick. For those of you guys who've read the book, do you guys feel like they did a good job with Finnick, or do you feel like they missed some stuff?
I felt like Finnick was maybe a little stereotyped, but I don't know what else they could have done further in the movie. I mean, you can't include everything into a movie. So I felt like they did a good job with him for the amount of time that he was shown in the film.
The whole idea was to sell people who hadn't read the book that exactly what Riley thought was he was going to betray her. And so I thought Sam Claflin did a great job in, pulling off this charming guy. And you think, well, at some point he's going to turn on her. And, that's the moment when he isn't the one that's actually standing there that she has to choose who to shoot in the book. In the movie, that's different. In the movie, he's standing there saying, remember who the enemy is. It was a different character. So I thought that was a really neat visual touch to, she had to choose if she was going to shoot who she thought would be the person to betray her. And they left out a line where she says in the book, when she sees the water, she says, well, we know who they wanted to win. And because he's from the water district, that's sort of all like not in there, but the water left him definitely an advantage in the arena, the way it was set up.
Right. And maybe you guys can correct me if I'm wrong here, but Finnick doesn't stay sane, does he? Because for some reason I keep remembering, doesn't Finnick go loopy?
Well, Annie's loopy, so his love of his life. Finnick's definitely. I mean, he's not loopy. He's really the kind of tragic character in it.
I just feel like I remember, and maybe I need to go back and read Mockingjay and Catching Fire again, but I feel like doesn't something happen to him that, I don't know, maybe I'm getting stuff confused.
Peeta's the one. Peeta's the one who
yeah. Okay.
Who marries Katniss? Who marries Katniss in the end, right?
All right. So my last question, or unless Trisha, did you have any other things you wanted to point out?
Well, I wanted to know, Teresa, who's was, because you asked everybody for Gale and Peeta, so you didn't get to answer.
So I've been a Team Gale fan, but the movies are making me go towards Peeta. I think
I'd agree with that, actually.
I think something that you said, I think Trisha, it was you that just said it, that Gale is the person that she thinks she should be with, because she knows him, she's comfortable with him, he's her best friend, and she feels like that's where she's supposed to be. But I think her heart is betraying her, and she doesn't know how to deal with that. That's what I think.
Well said.
All right, so my final question is something that I got from one of the Facebook groups I'm in. They asked this question. I thought it was good. So, who's more evil, Voldemort or President Snow?
Wow, that one's hard.
I have doomed you, Peeta Malak.
I can answer the first because I'm not a Harry Potter person, so I guess Snow is, but yeah, Snow is in my mind, but it's just because I don't have a affinity for the Harry Potter franchise, and lightning struck me right now. So,
Okay, well, for me, I kind of compare Voldemort to a Hitler, and I compare President Snow to like a Fidel Castro, based on kind of how they run things. But I would say in that vein, President Snow, because of the fact that he was created by his social circumstances, as opposed to his ideals.
I like that.
That's a tough question, and I'll start this question off by saying, hey, I have no idea in some ways. But if I were to ponder it out loud for a moment, I was thinking about it as you asked, and just this past summer, Bethany and I marathoned through with our mom. Actually, it was kind of a family project. All of the Harry Potter films,
Indeed.
and I enjoyed them far more than I thought I would. I kind of had I think I had a poor perception of what the story was about based on people who didn't like Harry Potter.
Have you not read these either?
Having people who
Riley.
What, the Harry Potter books?
Yes.
I haven't actually read them.
Of course
either.
not.
I'll go ahead.
Bethany. All of you.
But we've watched the movies.
There you go. I haven't read them either, so
I'm alone. I am alone in this whole entire virtual room.
Oh,
it's like sacrilege to Teresa.
I'm dying right now with my Harry Potter tattoo.
Oh,
all right.
Okay. All right. Go ahead.
Well, but having said that, I enjoyed the films way more than I thought I would. And there's something about... I think at this point in the story, as someone who hasn't finished the books, I think that there is a sympathetic side to Snow. And I think that there are arguments that can be made that I would strongly disagree with, that what he's doing is a greater good mindset. And it's interesting because from his perspective, no one who's a villain thinks they're a villain. Yeah. And I think the more evil one is the more one readily acknowledges and does nothing about one's own evilness.
So
and
you
so
speak
in
from
that
experience.
No.
Couldn't resist.
Maybe a little. But in that way, I think that Voldemort is a little more self-aware than Snow. So I would go with Voldemort, more evil.
There you go.
I actually disagree with that. Snow seems more calculating, and Snow can more readily see the consequences. Voldemort just seems... Frankly, he seems insane a fair amount of the time. And so... But Snow seems to be sane and calculating and knowing the full consequences of his actions, whereas I would question if Voldemort actually did know that, and if he was actually sane. Which, I don't know about that.
So, having the ability to do magic does not make you more evil?
No, I don't think that it does.
I don't either, but I just think it's an interesting query.
Mm-hmm. It is an interesting question. So, I guess would everybody recommend that you see Catching Fire?
Yes.
Yes.
Catching Fire fever, spreading around the country.
Great.
Like wildfire.
And the world.
I think we're pretty good on our chat now. So you guys. Would
Close
you want
out
to give
music, Riley?
Oh,
Close it out.
I know. I guess you were saying.
Wait. Let's give plugs.
All right, so let's.
Plugs.
And with that note, I guess that's our cue.
Okay, so this is Teresa. I'm at Ice Cold Penguin on Twitter.
And Trisha, I'm at Fangirl Cantina on Twitter.
This is Bethany, and I am at Bethany L. Blanton on Twitter. And
you can follow me at The Riley Guy on the Twitters. And if you're interested in Star Wars, head over to StarWarsReport.com.
Yeah, and you can follow Trisha at fangirlblog.com and me at fangirlnextdoor.com.
I was that.
Thanks, guys, and may the odds be ever in your favor.